There is a stretch of railroad in the Sierra Nevada where the snow does not fall in inches. It falls in stories, whole buildings of it. At Donner Summit, in the worst winters, the snow has piled 30 feet, 40 feet, and more, deep enough to bury a 2-story house and the chimney on top of it. And here is the part that stops me. For more than a century, through all of that, the trains kept running. Not most winters, not the easy ones. The trains ran through the kind of storm that drops 10 feet of snow in 13 days and buries the rails so completely that a man standing on the track cannot tell there is a track. That should not have been possible. We have machines now that struggle with this. They had men with shovels. I have been reading the records of how America kept its first transcontinental railroad open across the High Sierra, and the more I read, the less it sounds like engineering and the more it sounds like a siege. A war fought every winter against the snow, with no victory possible, only survival until spring. The men who fought it mostly left no names behind. The snow did not care who they were, and neither, for a long time, did the people who wrote the history. But the work they did was real, and some of it is still there, up on the mountain, waiting under the drifts. This is the story of how they did it. Not how they built the line, how they kept it alive. Start with the mountain, because the mountain is the whole problem. The Central Pacific Railroad pushed east out of Sacramento in the 1860s, climbing toward Donner Pass, a notch in the Sierra Nevada at just over 7,000 feet. Getting there was hard enough. Chinese crews, thousands of them, blasted and chiseled the grade and the summit tunnel out of solid granite by hand. But once the line was open, the company learned a second lesson, and it was worse than the first. The Sierra Nevada is one of the snowiest places in North America. The storms roll in off the Pacific, hit the wall of the mountains, and dump everything they carry right on top of the railroad. The summit averages over 30 feet of snowfall a year. In the big winters, it is far more than that. In 1880, one of the worst on record, more than 780 inches fell at Donner Summit. That is over 65 feet of snow in a single season. 25 feet of it came down in April alone, after most of the country had already called it spring. That winter earned a nickname on the mountain. They called it Hell on the Hill. If you care about the men who built this country with their hands, the workers nobody ever wrote a book about, please subscribe to Global Old History right now. Hit the button, come back. So picture the situation the railroad faced. You have just spent a fortune and uncounted lives cutting a line through the High Sierra. The line is the only fast route between the eastern United States and California. Mail, passengers, freight, the whole young economy of the West Coast, all of it depends on this single iron thread over the mountains. And every winter, for months at a time, nature buries it under 30 feet of snow and dares you to keep it open. There was no choice, they had to keep it open. The question was how? To understand who did this work, you have to understand who built the line in the first place. The Central Pacific could not find enough men willing to do the labor in the Sierra, so it turned to Chinese immigrants, and in the end the railroad over the mountains was built largely on their backs. At the height of construction, the company had something on the order of 12,000 Chinese workers on the grade, the great majority of its entire workforce. They cut the ledges, they set the black powder, they hauled the spoil, they drilled the summit tunnel through nearly 1,700 feet of granite, so hard the crews sometimes advanced only a foot or two a day, working from both ends and from a shaft sunk in the middle so they could attack the rock from 4 faces at once. They did all of this for less pay than white workers were offered, and when they organized and asked for fair wages and shorter hours in 1867, the company simply cut off their food supply until the strike broke. These were the men still on the mountain when winter came, and so they became the snow fighters too. In the beginning, the answer was the simplest and the cruelest one: men. Mostly Chinese laborers, the same crews who had built the line, were kept on through the winter as an army of shovelers. The first terrible winter the railroad faced up there was the winter of 1866 and 67, while the line was still being built. 44 separate storms hit the summit that season. The snowpack averaged 18 feet. One storm in February dropped 10 feet of snow in 13 days. The company's own snowshed supervisor, a man named Arthur Brown, wrote it down plainly, and his words have survived. He said that although every known appliance was used to keep the road clear of snow that winter, including the largest and best snowplows then known, it was found impossible to keep it open over half the time, and that mostly by means of men and shovels, which required an army of workers on hand all the time at great expense. An army of men and shovels. Read that again and think about what it actually meant. It meant thousands of men living on the side of a frozen mountain through the deepest winter, dug into the snow itself. The Chinese workers built tunnels under the drifts to get from their camps to the work sites without surfacing into the storm. They worked, ate, and slept down in those snow tunnels, in a world of white and cold and lamplight. When a train got buried, they dug it out by hand. When the cut filled in behind them, they dug that out too. They shoveled the snow into empty boxcars, and the railroad hauled it down the mountain to Sacramento and dumped it into the river, just to get it off the line. And the snow killed them. There is a detail in the record I cannot put down. One avalanche came off the slope and wiped out an entire Chinese work camp. The bodies were not found until the following spring, when the snow finally melted. And when they were found, the tools were still clutched in their frozen hands. They had died working. Another slide nearby swept 20 more men to their deaths. Here is the honest part, the part this channel never skips. We do not know their names. The men who shoveled the Sierra open winter after winter, who died in those camps with their tools in their hands, were almost never written down as individuals. The record kept the snowfall totals and the company's expenses and the supervisor's reports. It did not keep the names of the men in the snow tunnels. I wish I could read you a list. I cannot. The mountain took them, and the paperwork forgot them, and the most I can do is tell you they were there, and that the railroad would not have stayed open a single winter without them. The same Arthur Brown who wrote about the army of men and shovels had another idea, and it was an enormous one. If you could not stop the snow from falling, you could at least keep it from ever touching the rails. So the Central Pacific built a roof over its own railroad. Mile after mile of timber snow sheds, heavy wooden galleries built right over the track, sloped so the snow and the avalanches would slide off the top and down the mountainside while the trains ran through the dark, dry tunnel underneath. At the height of it, the railroad had built tens of miles of these sheds across the summit, an almost continuous wooden tube through the worst of the mountain. So much of it that travelers complained they could not see the famous Sierra scenery at all, only the inside of a wooden box. It was one of the largest timber structures in the country. It was also a constant danger, because it was wood, and the locomotives that ran through it threw sparks, and fire in the dry months was a real and recurring threat. The sheds had to be patrolled, repaired, rebuilt, watched. They saved the line, and they were a burden on it both at once. But the sheds covered only the worst stretches. Between them, out in the open cuts, the snow still fell and still had to be moved. And that brought the railroad back to the same problem, and to the machine that would finally meet it. The shovel army worked, but it could not work forever, and it could not work fast enough. So the railroad reached for its first real machine, and it was a brutal, simple thing. It was the wedge plow. The bucker plow, the railroaders called it. Imagine a giant iron wedge, a sloped blade like the prow of a ship, bolted to the front of a rail car. The idea is straight out of common sense. You point the wedge at the snow and you ram it. The snow splits on the blade and gets shoved off to either side of the track. To push it, you needed power, so they coupled several locomotives behind the plow, sometimes 3, sometimes more, all of them shoving as one, and then they charged the drift. This is the part that sounds insane, and it was. To clear a deep cut full of packed snow, the bucker plow could not just creep forward. The snow was too heavy, too dense. So the engineers backed the whole train up. A half mile, a mile, whatever they could get, opened the throttles, and ran the locomotives and the plow flat out into the wall of snow. They hit the drift at speed and let momentum do the cutting. The plow would drive deep into the snow, throwing it up and out until it stopped dead, buried to the blade. Then they backed up and did it again. And again, charge, bury, reverse, charge again, gaining a few feet of clean track each time, hour after hour. It worked, after a fashion, but it was violent and dangerous. Men were thrown around inside the cabs when the plow hit. Equipment broke, and in really deep snow, the bucker plow simply lost. There is only so much snow you can shove sideways before there is no more sideways left. before the snow on the banks is higher than the plow itself, and the cut becomes a canyon with no room to push anything anywhere. In the worst winters, the bucker plows failed, and it was back to the men and the shovels. Quick pause. If these stories matter to you, join the Boss tier for $4.99 a month. Loyalty badge, custom emoji, early access 24 hours before public, and members-only polls. Link in the description. Now back to it. The bucker plow had a ceiling, and everyone who worked the mountain knew it. What the railroad needed was a machine that did not shove the snow aside, but lifted it up and threw it clear away, out of the cut entirely, over the banks, so the snow could pile as deep as it liked, and the machine would still have somewhere to put it. That machine came from an unlikely place, and from an unlikely man. The idea began with a dentist. His name was J.W. Elliott, a dentist in Toronto, Canada, and in 1869, he sketched out a concept for a snowplow that did not push, but rotated, revolving blades that would cut into the snow and fling it away from the track. It was a clever idea. Elliott never built it. He could not find anyone willing to put money behind a dentist's drawing of a spinning snow machine, and his patent sat. It took 15 years and a second man to bring it to life. His name was Orange Jewel of Orangeville, Ontario, and in the early 1880s, he revived Elliott's idea and made it real. Jewel tested his designs with sand, working out the shapes that would catch and throw the heavy material. He added the pieces that mattered: pivoting steel plates, chambers to catch the snow and eject it away from the train, a steam engine to drive it all, and a gear system to connect that engine to the blades. Joel did not build the machines himself. For that, he turned to two brothers, Edward and Sam Leslie of Toronto, and during the winter of 1883 and 84, they built a full-size prototype. It worked. It worked so well that the Leslie brothers bought the rights from Joel, moved to Paterson, New Jersey, and founded the Rotary Steam Shovel Manufacturing Company to build the things in quantity. By the late 1880s, the rotary snowplow was going into service on the mountain railroads of North America, and the Sierra Nevada was exactly the kind of place it was made for. Let me tell you what a rotary snowplow actually is, because it is one of the strangest and most beautiful machines the age of steam ever produced. Picture a rail car with a giant wheel on the front, not a road wheel. A wheel of blades, a great circular set of curved steel cutters, standing up tall as a man and wider than the train, mounted on the front of the car like the face of a fan. Behind that wheel, inside the car, sits a steam engine whose only job is to spin it. The locomotives behind the rotary do not drive the blades at all. They only push the whole machine forward, slowly, into the snow. The spinning is separate. The blades turn fast, biting into the drift, and the snow they cut does not get shoved aside. It gets pulled into the chamber behind the wheel, channeled upward, and hurled out through a chute on the top. And it throws the snow far. A working rotary in deep snow sends up a plume, a white fountain arcing out over the bank, far from the track. The crew could even aim it, swinging the chute to throw the snow to the left or to the right, depending on the lay of the cut. That is the whole genius of it. The snow can be 30 feet deep, 40 feet deep, and the rotary does not care because it is not trying to push the snow somewhere. It is throwing it into the sky and letting it land wherever it lands, far from the rails. A bucker plow fills the cut with banks until it chokes. A rotary just keeps eating and throwing, cutting a clean-walled trench straight through a mountain of snow. It is slow. A rotary moving through a deep drift might crawl forward at a walking pace, the blades roaring, the steam screaming, the plume of snow hanging over it like a flag. But slow, and certain beats fast and stuck. Where the bucker plow had to charge and retreat and charge again, the rotary just advanced, foot by foot, and the snow it left behind stood in vertical walls on either side, taller than the train, carved clean by the spinning blade. But first, do me a favor and subscribe. The algorithm buries old industry stories like this one unless enough people click. One click. Come back. So now picture the full system the railroad built to fight the Sierra winter. All of it working together. The snow sheds, miles of timber tunnels covering the most exposed track, so the snow never landed on the rails in the first place, in the worst stretches. The bucker plows, charging the lighter drifts. The rotary plows, grinding through the deep cuts and throwing the snow to the sky. And behind all of it, always, the men, the shovel crews, digging out what the machines could not reach, clearing switches and signals, and the spots where the snow fell faster than any plow could move. Even with the rotary, even with the sheds, the mountain in a bad winter still needed an army of men with shovels. The machines never fully replaced them, they just gave them a fighting chance. And still, sometimes, the mountain won. Because here is the thing about a machine, even a great one, it can be buried too. A rotary throwing a clean plume through a deep cut is a wonderful sight, right up until an avalanche comes off the slope above it and buries the rotary itself. Then your snow-clearing machine is the thing that needs to be dug out, and you are back to the men and the shovels, digging out the digger. The Sierra has done this many times. It has buried the very machines built to defeat it. To keep one rotary from getting stranded behind a fresh slide, the railroads learned to run them in pairs in the worst storms. One rotary at each end of a set of locomotives, blades pointed in opposite directions, so the train could always cut its way back out the way it came. And the trains got trapped anyway, even in the great years of the rotary. Go back to that terrible winter of 1880. Hell on the Hill. The year more than 60 feet of snow fell on the summit. 3 big storm cycles in January alone stacked 16 feet of fresh snow on Donner Pass. Near a place called Emigrant Gap, a huge avalanche came down on a train full of passengers and trapped it. The plows could not reach them. They sat in the snow for 50 hours, 2 whole days and more, living on crackers and coffee, while crews fought toward them through the drifts. They were rescued, eventually. But it tells you something that even with the wedge plows working and the rotary about to arrive, a single slide could still swallow a train and hold it for 2 days in plain sight of the line. The mountain was never beaten. It was only, on the good days, held off. Which brings me to the most famous winter siege of all, and the one that put a human face on 100 years of this struggle. January, 1952. By then, the railroad over Donner was run by the Southern Pacific, and the trains were not the wooden cars of the 1860s. The pride of the line was the city of San Francisco, a streamliner, a sleek, modern passenger train that ran between Chicago and the Bay. On the 13th of January, the city of San Francisco came up the mountain into a blizzard that had already been raging for days. The train was running late, more than 20 hours behind schedule, fighting the storm the whole way. It carried 226 people, passengers and crew. As it worked its way over the summit and started down the western slope, near a place called Yuba Pass, the snow caught it. A drift broadsided the train. The engineers tried to push through. Then a second drift, 12 feet of packed snow, stopped the locomotives cold, and these were not weak engines. The combined diesel power on the head end was over 6,000 horsepower, and it was not enough. The engineer, a man named Tom Sapunor, said the words that ended it. He said, "That's it, we can't make it." And there they sat. A modern luxury streamliner, full of people, stuck on the side of the Sierra Nevada in a blizzard with winds near 100 miles an hour, in exactly the spot where Chinese shovelers had dug trains out by hand 80 years before. The mountain had not changed. Only the train had. What happened over the next 3 days is the whole story of Donner in miniature. At first it was almost comfortable. The train had heat and light and a dining car, but the storm did not stop, and the snow kept rising. By Monday afternoon, the electrical power was failing, the lights dimmed and then went out. The steam that heated the cars depended on water, and when the water tanks ran dry, the heat died too. Outside, it was 22 degrees. By Monday night, the snow had risen above the windows of the train. The passengers were sitting inside a steel tube, slowly being buried, the daylight at the glass turning to gray and then to nothing. And then it got dangerous, in a way no one expected. To keep warm, propane heaters were brought into play, and propane in an enclosed space produces carbon monoxide. Passengers began to collapse, 1 at first, then 30, then 60. A physician aboard, a man named Walter Rohel, went to work treating them, fighting the invisible gas car by car. The record even holds the strange small detail that he had only 1 syringe, and he sterilized it with gin from the bar to keep treating people. The food ran short. The steward began rationing what was left. One quick note. I turned the full story of keeping the trains running through the Sierra snow into a book. Everything the records gave me. All the names and all the numbers. If you want it, the link is in the description. Outside, the rescue was its own war against the same enemy. The Southern Pacific sent its rotary plows up the mountain to cut through to the trapped train, the same kind of machine the Leslie brothers had built 60 years before. and the mountain buried them. All 4 of the railroad's rotary plows that were thrown at the storm failed. Avalanches came down on top of them. 2 rotaries were trapped by snowslides. And in the worst of it, the crew of one of the plows did not come back. A man named Roland Raymond, called Rolly, was killed when his snowplow flipped. Another rescuer, Pershing Gold, 33 years old, died of a heart attack out in the snow while carrying food toward the train. The men trying to save the stranded passengers were dying in the same storm. So the rescue came the old way, the human way. Skiers from the Soda Springs Hotel reached the train on Monday night on their own legs, hauling supplies across the drifts. A rescue train sent up the mountain derailed in the snow, and the rescuers kept going by dog sled, led by a Samoyed named Rex the Blizzard King. The power company brought in a tracked snow vehicle, a snowcat, for the final push. And in the end, crews dug a trench by hand and machine, 1,000 feet of trench through the snow, from the buried train out to the highway above. On the 16th of January, 3 days after the city of San Francisco rolled into the storm, the passengers came out. Bundled in blankets, their faces covered against the wind, they climbed up the slippery path out of the trench, some of them carried, and into waiting vehicles on Highway 40. All 226 of them got off the mountain alive. The carbon monoxide had hurt many of them, but none of the passengers died. The dead were the men of the rescue, out in the snow, doing the same work the shovel crews had done in the 1860s, and dying of it. That is the thing about this railroad and this mountain. The machines got bigger, the trains got faster and warmer and stronger. The rotary plow was a marvel, the bucker plow was a brute, the snow sheds were miles of engineering. And still, in 1952, when the storm was at its worst, the final answer was the same as it had been in 1867. Men going out into the snow on foot with shovels and dog sleds in their own bodies to dig the train free. What remains of all this today? A surprising amount, if you know where to look. The original line over Donner, the one the Chinese built and the shovel armies kept open, was eventually paralleled by a second track and a longer tunnel, and the old summit route was finally taken out of regular service. But the grade is still there. The hand-cut tunnels are still there, the granite still scarred by the black powder and the chisels, the walls still smudged in places with the soot of 100 years of locomotives. People walk through the old summit tunnel now, in summer, where Chinese workers once lived in the dark and dug trains out of the snow. The remnants of the snow sheds, the great timber galleries can still be traced along the mountainside. And the rotary snowplow itself did not vanish. Railroads in the snow country still keep a few in reserve, and a handful of the old steam rotaries are preserved and even run on special days, the great bladed wheel spinning up once more, throwing its white plume into the air for people who have never seen a machine fight a mountain. But the deepest thing that remains is harder to point to, because it has no marker. It is up there in the snow, in the places where the camps were, where the slides came down, where men were found in the spring with their tools still in their hands. The mountain keeps no record, and the company kept very little. We have the snowfall totals. We have the supervisor's report about the army of men and shovels. We have a few names. From 1952, the engineer who said we can't make it, the doctor with his one syringe, the plowman who died when his machine flipped. But the thousands who held that line through the deep winters, winter after winter, mostly went unnamed, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. What I can say is this. Every time a train crossed the High Sierra in the dead of winter, every time the mail got through and the freight moved and the passengers slept warm, while 60 feet of snow fell on the mountain around them, it was because someone, somewhere out in that storm, had gone out and dug. The rotary plow was real, and the bucker plow was real, and the snow sheds were real. But underneath every one of those machines was a man with a shovel, and most of the time we do not know his name. That is the part that stays with me. Not the snow, though the snow is staggering. Not the machines, though the machines are magnificent. It is the simple, unglamorous, endless work of clearing the line, done by people who knew the snow would just fall again tomorrow, and went out and cleared it anyway. Because the country, on the other side of the mountains, was waiting for the train. The trains ran through 40 feet of snow. They ran because the men would not let the mountain win, even though the mountain always came back. And it is still coming back, every winter, up there at the summit, falling in stories on the empty grade where they fought it. One more thing. If you want to be part of the inner circle on this channel, join Final Boss for $9.99 a month. Public shout-out in upcoming videos, members-only investigations, plus everything from boss tier. Link in description. See you in the next one.